Hey everyone, I'm Mitchell Ray, and you're listening to another episode of the Real Music Nashville podcast. In this episode, I got to sit down with Jim Ivins for one of my very first Zoom podcasts, and I think it went really great. Jim Ivins is the vocalist and guitarist for the Ivins, and his brother Jack Ivins plays the drums, Hatton Taylor plays lead guitar, and Reagan Akers plays the bass. I loved this podcast not only because they're just great musicians and their music is awesome, but I really didn't have to do much. Jim's an amazing speaker, and he goes into great detail about the origins of the Ivins and kind of what brought them to Nashville. You can find them on all social media as The Ivins, and their website is theivins.com. We have some good news. The YouTube channel is going to be active Monday. The Ivins were kind enough to make a great, unique music video for our podcast, and it's of their latest single, Bloom, that's out now. You can find it on pretty much any streaming, iTunes. You can find it pretty much anywhere. It's a great song. Go check it out. I'll post the link for the YouTube channel in the podcast details, and definitely check this video out. They were super kind to create this for the podcast, and it's just a great piece of content. I'm very grateful. That being said, I think that does it for this week's updates for the podcast. And before we transition into the episode itself, I want to promote Andrew Atkins' new album. The Echoist is out now on all platforms. He's a podcast guest whose episode has not come out yet, but his album has. And I just want to make sure everyone who listens to this show can find it. Again, The Echoist, it's really great. He has some really catchy stuff. So just look up Andrew Atkins, and I'm sure it'll pop up. If you'd like your album or single to be promoted on this show, just contact me at realmusicnashville@gmail.com, and we can make that happen. Now let's get into the episode with Jim Ivins, and we'll transition with a clip from one of their singles that they released this year called Composure. And don't forget to stick around for the end of the episode where I'll be playing the full version of their latest single, Bloom. Okay, cool.
All right. Also, we are recording that live session on Tuesday night.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So I'm gonna get that. I'll edit it, and then I'll shoot it over to you by the end of next week.
That'd be awesome. What kind of studio setup do you guys have, or do you have access to like someone else's?
Yeah. So we just we've got some friends around. So we're actually recording this session at SAE. The school that's like right on Music Row, like behind the BMI building.
Yeah, I've seen their ads.
Yeah, we did our single Certain there. We've become friends with the main engineer there. He used to run the tracking room before that went down. RIP. His name is Matt Lay. He's a great guy, and so we did Certain there, and then I did a solo song there. In fact, the week that quarantine happened, it was the last thing that I did. Like I remember, I think we did the song on a Wednesday, and the at-home mandate happened on like a Saturday or something.
Wow.
And so I actually just got the session for that like 2 days ago, because it's just been sitting on a computer in SAE this whole time. And
that's always terrifying if you've ever recorded anything, to have just track sitting on. Hopefully it was backed up or something, but just
it was backed up completely.
Yeah.
But it was just I couldn't finish it. And I've been doing more music this year, oddly enough, than I have in my entire life. So I was like, well, why don't I finish that song? Like I've been doing everything else at home. Just because we did basic tracks there, And the idea was that I was going to come back and do vocals, but then quarantine happened. And then, obviously they shut down the school and they shut down life.
Yeah, they shut down
And
everything.
so I just didn't do it. But I've been, I've done a bunch of new songs for the Ivins. I recorded a EP for a new project with Brian Craddock from Daughtry. I sang vocals on that. And then I've done songs for everybody else. I've just been doing it in my closet. And it's like, as long as you have a competent mixer,
right,
it all works out. So I was like, well, damn, I really want to finish this song. So I just got it. So I'm going to finish that up. But yeah, we're going to.
How can people access, is any of this stuff out yet? Or like you said, you sang on someone else's track?
Yeah. So, I've done a couple quarantine covers for other people. One of those is out. I did, some friends of mine asked me to sing House on Fire by Rise Against. So I did that. That's on Instagram. I'll shoot you a link when we're done here.
Yeah.
And then I just did Days of the Week by Stone Temple Pilots for another group of people.
That's cool.
That has not come out yet. And then the EP with Brian, it's a new group. We're calling ourselves Post Traumatic Sons, which we've never talked about anywhere before. So that's out of the bag. So
well, perfect.
We did an EP this spring into the early summer, and then he's just gotten super busy, and Daughtry's making a new album. And so that just hasn't gotten finished yet, but it's sitting right now, and it's really good.
Awesome.
And then the Ivins, we put out a song called Composure in July, and then we put out a song called Bloom that's coming out next week, October 30th. So I don't know when this is going to come out, but on October 30th, Bloom will come out. And then we just kind of inadvertently wrote a new album. So we're going to have new singles out every 2 months for the foreseeable future.
You guys just wrote a new album?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So when you say inadvertently, did COVID have anything to do with that?
Yeah, it was. So here's what's even funnier. So we worked on a new album for 2 years because we, our buddy Michael Zusso, who runs Keystone Studios in Berry Hill, it's in the Average Joe's building.
Yeah.
I met him. I was working at Jack Brown's as a bartender, and Zeus was just a regular, and we became friends. And then I found out what he did for a living, and he became a fan of the band, and we were going to make a new album, and our studio situation fell through. And then he was like, yeah, I'll do your record. And I was like, oh, like, okay. And at the time he was working sound for Lauren Elena. So he was like, well, I'm busy a lot, but when I come back, we can just kind of like do sessions, in between, stuff that I already have going on. And so we did that. And then in the middle of the album, he moved from Lauren Elena to working for Luke Combs. Oh, wow. So as you can imagine, his life got a little crazier.
Yeah, a little busier.
So we just kind of slowly made this album for like 2 years. The week it got mastered, quarantine happened and the music industry shut down for the year. Yeah. So we had a lot of plans for 2020 that were centered around this other album that is just sitting right now. So then I start making my Quarantunes album, which just came out on streaming today, October 23rd.
Is this your solo project?
Yeah. So brief digression.
Yeah.
We, when quarantine happened and everyone was locked down, it occurred to me, so I just turned 32, but it occurred to me that...
Good for you, man. I'm 32 as well.
All right, we made it.
Right.
It occurred to me that since I was a teenager, I have never just had time to just like create. Like, because I've always have jobs and weekends, things are always going on,
and the grind is
and I never really just have time to just create, because there's always it's always I'm having to create in what's the way I want to say this? In spite of something else. It's like it's like I have all these other things going on, but I should create something, so I got to do this. But I've never just had the time to just do it. So I told myself at the beginning of lockdown, I was like, okay, on the weekends, I'm just going to write and record music all day, Saturday and Sunday, and just see what happens.
Yeah.
And it started out, I had no idea if anything was going to come out, because, just telling myself, be creative, right? Which I know is like everyone in Nashville does, but that's just never how I've done it. Yeah. I come from a different background than the Nashville, let's all get together and, write a hit song today mentality. That's just never been me.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if I could even just like make myself write. And then in the first day, I wrote 3 songs, and they were like really good, and they were all different styles. And I was like, oh, well, that was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens tomorrow. And then the next day, it happened again. And so then every weekend, I started writing these songs, and I was like, am I making a solo album? Like, I don't know. And then it occurred to me, we've been fortunate enough to like get really into like the tribute show circuit these last couple years.
Yeah, I saw that you guys did, I think, a Nirvana, and then like a Taking Back Sunday versus Brand New thing.
So that one never happened.
Oh,
that was supposed to happen like the end of March, and then they canceled everything. So yeah, so we have done. So it started off. There were 2 guys. One, his name is Brandon Bruce, and he runs this company called King Thrust Entertainment. And we got on his radar after he, right when Chris Cornell passed away. There was a Chris Cornell tribute show at the Basement East, and it was amazing. It was like 3 hours of all these musicians coming together to play Chris Cornell music, and I was like,
yeah, that sounds
what
amazing.
is this? Like, this is incredible. And so then he did one for Dave Grohl, and then a couple months after that, he did one for Tool. And we got up and played a Tool song, which is just like so not in our like normal wheelhouse at all, but that's what made it so fun.
What'd you guys play?
Oh God, what was that song? Was it Sweat? Yeah, Sweat.
Okay.
Just because like,
how did it go? I'm assuming it went over. I said, how did it go? I mean, you said it's not in your wheelhouse.
Did it go all right? It went pretty well. The unfortunately the most memorable thing about it was that I guess I got a little too hyped up, and I start kind of like, headbanging and twirling my head a bunch. Well, then I got the spins.
Oh no.
So I fall over. Not once, not twice, 3 times.
So now you just look like
sold out Basement East. I keep falling over.
Yeah.
Now
you just look like the drunk
somehow
guy.
In all of this, I managed to not knock anything over. I didn't knock into any of my bandmates, and I never dropped a lyric, but I looked like a crazy person.
Yeah.
So everyone thinks I'm like on ecstasy or something, and I'm like, just freaking out. But I just got the spins from spinning my head too much. And this was so funny. I was praying that people would forget about this. And like 6 months later, I'm at the Cobra. I think we were doing a gig, and the bartender was like, did you play in a Tool tribute one night? I was like, oh, yeah, I did. She's like, you're the guy that kept falling over. Like,
you were the wasted guy up on stage.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, if you could believe it, I really hadn't been drinking that much at all, and no drugs. I just am an idiot. I don't know. And so we did a bunch of shows for King Thrust, and then eventually we never did that Taking Back Sunday one, but for King Thrust, we did a tribute night to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater soundtrack.
Oh, dude.
And that was a lot of fun because we did like 5 songs. We did a Simple Song by Avail, The Boy Who Destroyed the World by AFI, TNT by AC/DC, Guerrilla Radio, Rage Against the Machine. And we might have done another song. I can't remember. I know we did those 4. It was 4, maybe 5.
That
one was super fun. And then the summer before, we did a Warped Tour tribute because it was like that was the last summer they were doing the Warped Tour.
Right.
So we did that one, and we played Miss Murder by AFI, Grand Theft Autumn, Fall Out Boy, Ohio is for Lovers by Hawthorne Heights, and The Anthem by Good Charlotte.
Very nice.
But then on the flip side of that, this guy Tyson Leslie, who is just like the most popular person in Nashville, and he's like the most talented musician I've ever seen. He puts on this show called Rare Hair, and Rare Hair is like a tribute to 80s metal, kind of like in all different shapes and forms. Like sometimes it's like the glammy stuff, and sometimes it's thrash.
Yeah.
And so we've done that a bunch, and then we started our own called Grunge Night, which you could take a wild stab at what that one is.
Yeah. So where are you guys doing these shows at? You said who's putting them on?
For the most part, all of these are at Basement East.
Okay.
So you can imagine how heartbroken I was when they got hit by the tornado, because that's pretty much just like our home away from home. So, but I'm sorry, but you asked about Nirvana. That was a King Thrust one.
Okay.
So that was Brandon had wanted to do all of Bleach, all of Nevermind, and all of In Utero in one night.
Oh man, that would be incredible.
And so we did Lithium, Polly, which was a hybrid of Polly from Nevermind and then the punk version of Polly that's on Incesticide.
Okay.
And then we did Francis Farmer and Very Ape from In Utero.
Yeah.
And then I dressed up like Kurt. And
I think I saw some pictures on. I may have seen that on Instagram. Did you post it?
People seem to like that. So I bought these, the big white sunglasses like we had on the cover of Rolling Stone.
I did see that picture. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was pretty fun. But so then we started our own called Grunge Night, and we had just done the fourth one right before COVID hit, and that the fourth one was the craziest one because that's when Chris Daughtry performed.
Okay.
And that was insane
to
get him because Brian Craddock and Josh Paul from Daughtry had done the third Grunge Night, and I think and it was funny, we got them to do it, but like we didn't want to like ask them like, hey, you think Chris would want to do this too? Just we were like, no, because that'll sound like we're using them, and we're not using them at all because they're great guys and they're amazing musicians. Yeah, because we didn't want them to think that we were just like using them to get to Chris Daughtry, because we weren't at all. Like, it just so happened that they were in Daughtry, and we were looking for someone to sing a Soundgarden song. And I was like, no one can sing a Soundgarden song, but there's like 3 people I know that can do it. And we're like, that would be cool if he would, but like, we didn't push it. So they did the third one. They really liked it. And then when we asked them to do the fourth one, I think both of them individually were like, okay, Chris would really like doing this. And so it became like a will he, won't he, like right up until the last minute. And then he did it. So not only did they performed as Daughtry, which was crazy, and Marty Fredrickson came and played guitar with them. And Marty Fredrickson is this like incredible producer and songwriter. And the craziest thing I can talk about him is that he's the voice of Stillwater in Almost Famous.
Oh,
so Jason Lee's character. So he wrote those songs and he sings Jason Lee's vocals in Almost Famous.
Dude, that's awesome.
That's my favorite movie ever.
Yeah.
So I'm like, holy shit, the Stillwater guy is playing the show. So they did 2 songs as Daughtry, and then so me and my brother Jack, who's the drummer in the Ivins, we started a Alice in Chains tribute band called Into the Flood. And so every Grunge Night, we close the night with an hour of Alice in Chains music.
Wow.
So we're doing Into the Flood. It's the last song of the night, which is Wood, which is where we got the name. And right before the first chorus, this person runs out on stage to grab a microphone, and it's Chris Daughtry. And I'll be honest, I was extremely intoxicated at this point, so I cannot believe what is happening. I'm just like, oh shit, it's Chris Daughtry. And so there it was. But yeah, so tribute shows have become a lot of fun, and I was looking forward to that Taking Back Sunday brand new one, but we'll do it someday. Sorry, that's like a 20-minute answer to a very banal question, but that's kind of who I am.
You're perfect for podcasts then. I mean, just go, dude. Yeah. All right, so you said that like the basement is sort of your home or whatever. So
yeah, absolutely.
Do you find that a lot? Like bands have, I guess, venues that they sort of consider to be like their home base, and then you kind of just get like spread from there. Or, I mean, I know that's the way it is with comedians, like the Comedy Store out in California.
No, you're not wrong. You are definitely not wrong. I here 1 second. I'm just testing one more thing. Why is this not coming through my headphones? Yeah,
audio troubles. Test 1 2.
Oh wait, nope, I got it. Hold it. Say something. Hey, there we go. All right, cool. Anyway, it's funny you say that. Yes, I do find that. It's funny. I was just talking with someone the other night, and they said some band I'd never heard of, but I heard their name, and I just go, judging a book by its cover, I'll bet you they play the East Room a lot, don't they? And the guy goes, how did you know that? I was like,
so what gave it away?
There are some bands that just play the East Room. Like you could just tell. It's like those quirky, kind of indie or, fuzzy kind of bands. Like those kind of like play the East Room.
Yeah.
And there are bands that play the basement or the basement East. There's bands that play the 5 spot.
So break it down for me then. If Nashville was a Grand Theft Auto video game map with all the gang territories, where would you see the different areas of Nashville broken up by genre?
Oh my God, dude, that is an incredible question. I'll be perfectly honest. I have not played Grand Theft Auto since I was 18.
Right.
I was,
Well, I mean, it's
like
a
I
general
played
concept.
it. I loved it.
It's a
but oh
general
my God,
concept.
how would this be? I would say, East Nashville is the hipsters.
Obviously, yeah.
Which is funny that I say that because that's where we play more often than not, but that's just so not who we are. I feel like we fit in more on like the rock block, even though like we never play there.
Yeah.
But oh man, that's a great question. If the other guys in the band were on right now, they could answer that better because they're all gamers and I'm not.
Yeah. Well, I'm not asking.
But that's an incredible question, by the way. That's very good.
Well, I'm not asking for like to lay it out on the Grand Theft Auto's map, but like the map.
No, I know what you meant.
You know?
I know what you meant.
Yeah. Well, anyways, yeah. I just I never knew that. So like I'm a huge fan of comedy. That's all I listen to during work because I have to have a 9 to 5. Unfortunately,
Don't we all?
Yeah, I know it's terrible. Yeah, so I've always heard about comedians having, a home base sort of venue that they sort of grew up around and came up in and everything, and I just never knew that to be the case with bands and everything too. So
it's funny you say that though, because for 2 reasons. One, I can relate a little bit to what you said because I used to live in New York, and for a while I was doing stand up on the side.
Were you really?
Was one of my oldest friends. He moved to New York to do stand up and do improv, and I was always fascinated by all of that. Just I've loved stand up my whole life, and so I'd always like every time I go visit him before I moved there, I'd be like, hey, so you're gonna like go up somewhere, right? I want to see you do stand up. And he's like, yeah, cool. And so finally, like right before I moved to New York, it was the last time I went to visit him, and it was like the reason that kind of like put it over the edge for why I was gonna move. I was like, hey, we're going, you're going up somewhere, right? He's like, yeah, cool. Like, let's go. So we start walking. I take a phone call and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to go see Sam do stand up. Yeah. All right, bye. I hang up the phone. He goes, you're going up with me tonight, right? It's like, what? And so that he just kind of forced me into it. I did it for like a year when I was living in New York, but it's hard. I mean, it is the hardest art form that exists, bar none. And so I knew that. Like I didn't suck at it, but like because there were several people that just like awful. Yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm not that bad, but like if I really want to get good at this, I mean, I have to dedicate my life to this, and
100%.
music will always be my number one. Yeah. So like I can't do that, so I stopped doing it. But the second part of your question, you didn't know that bands really attach themselves to venues. What's funny is I've always done that since I was a teenager coming up in like the punk scene in Richmond, Virginia, which is where I'm from. There was a club there called Alley Cats, and that became kind of legendary amongst, I mean, like every pop punk rock, like whatever band you've ever heard of, like has played Alley Cats a million times. And so I did that. That's just like where I cut my teeth. Yeah. And then when Alley Cats went away,
did you have like older musicians there that sort of took you under their wing and showed you the ropes or anything like that?
No, not at all. Everything I've ever had to do, I've always had to go on my own. There's always been a handful of people. So I lived in Richmond. Came up there, moved to New York, and then moved here. Pretty much everything we've ever wanted, we've had to get ourselves. We had very, very little help from anyone. So it puts a chip on your shoulder, but I think it's humbling and it's good for you because, I think it's easy to get complacent if you have people, helping you out all the time. Yeah. So I think, I think it's also good because it forces you to make the mistakes that everyone's supposed to make. And I think those are important experiences to have.
Those mistakes are so important. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about, you sort of just went through like your little origin, a little bit of like an origin story from Virginia to New York, Nashville. Mm-hmm. You were talking about an experience that prompted and put you over the edge that made you want to move to New York. Yes. Talk about that a little bit. Like, what was it about New York that drew you there? I mean, obviously it's, there's many reasons, but go ahead.
It's one of these things where like it's impossible not to sound like a douche when you say something like this, but like there is just something about the energy of New York City that is indescribable and that you can really only find out if you live there.
Yeah.
And I've been enamored by New York City my whole life, and I almost went to college there. I chickened out at the last minute, stayed in Virginia for a girl who broke up with me very shortly after I started college, as she should have. So that guy that I was going to visit, we had talked about going to college together.
Yeah.
And but he went because he wasn't a pussy like me. And also I can talk like that on here, right?
Yeah. You're good.
Okay, cool. Sorry, that's just kind of how I talk. So I would go visit him every year, and every year I was like, why didn't I do this? And at the same time, I was always enamored by, well, one, the original, CBGBs, punk rock, that whole scene and everything. That was always, amazing to me, and I was always fascinated by that. But also the early 2000s, which, the Struts and the Yeah Yeah Yeahs and TV on the Radio and, all of those bands, that it was just this like incredible artist collective, going on in,
Right.
the Lower East Side and Brooklyn and everything. And I always just thought that was so cool, that whole community. And I wanted to be a part of it. So finally, when I got to the end of college in Virginia, I was just like, I don't have anything keeping me here. And we had been, at that point, I guess I was 23 by the time I was going to move. I'd been playing in the scene in Virginia since I was 15, and just had kind of hit every glass ceiling that there was. It just kind of became very apparent that no matter what I did, even though I did everything that you're supposed to do, it's just like, it just was not going to happen for me in Virginia. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to move to New York, and I'm going to see if I can make this happen. And I was there for 2 years, and I left because while I was up there, the band that morphed into the Ivins, we ended up getting a manager. And the funny thing about this manager was that, brief backstory. So my brother and our cousin, his name is Bill Leverty, and he plays in a band called Firehouse, which, if you're familiar with like hair bands, that's a term that everyone in that community hates, and I hate too, but it's the easiest way to describe them. They were like the last really big one before like Nirvana and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam all just kind of like had the huge changing of the guard. So Firehouse sold 8 million records, and they were all over MTV and the radio, and they won an American Music Award and everything. And so my cousin Bill is kind of why I am who I am. And the guy who signed Firehouse ended up representing us, but it was from a channel that had nothing to do with our cousin. It was just kind of kismet. And so we met him towards the end of my time in New York, and he was like, all right, you got to move back to Virginia because it'll look way more unique if you guys break out of Virginia. It's not happening here in New York. And he was right. I quickly realized upon moving there that scene that I was so enamored by with the Strokes and the Yeah Yeah Yeahs and everything, that does not exist anymore.
Yeah.
So we moved back to Virginia, and he was like, you're about to be the biggest band in the world. You're about to get, the record deal. You're going to go on tour. Like it's all about to blow up. It's going to happen right now. And that did not happen. Long story short, but it was an experience, kind of being on the edge of your seat for a couple of years.
Yeah. So, I mean, was he just blowing smoke up your ass? Like what was the thing that didn't, he seemed to have a grand plan, move back to Virginia, have an image.
Yeah, what was funny about him was that he used to be the head of A&R at Sony for like 30 years.
Oh, wow.
So he signed, a ton of huge bands, but he never managed anybody before.
Right.
So us and this one other kid from San Francisco were like his like pilot projects.
Right.
Like just like, okay, I was on the label side forever because, he hadn't been with Sony for a little while at that point. So he was like, well, I'd done the label thing forever. Why don't I try managing and see, if I can make that happen? And it's funny to talk about that time because I don't think he was a bad guy. I don't think he ever like willfully deceived us ever. I genuinely believe that he really thought that we could be the biggest band in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that just the way the industry was at the time, I mean, this was like 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
So at this point, I mean, rock music is like at the lowest of the low points that it had ever been. Because you got to think right now, Greta Van Fleet is playing arenas, but I mean, like they didn't break until 2018, 2019. And, you know, rock has only kind of started to come back in the last like 2 years. So at the time, what we were finding was people were just scared shitless to sign a rock band, especially like a baby band, because, you know, there's no money in the music industry anymore. So like back in the day, you know, you could put a gamble on a baby band and it might just pay off. But now people are like, I don't want to gamble on anything. So even before we met him, while we were in New York, we were actually being repped by 21 Pilots lawyer for a time, which is this guy who was based out of Mississippi, which is just kind of funny. And we had a situation where he was shopping us to labels, and the first conversation he would have with all of them would always be so positive. It would be like, oh my God, like, I love this band. Like, I love these songs. Like, I mean, let's talk again in 2 weeks. He'd call us, be like, guys, it's all good. We're going to talk in 2 weeks. Like, get ready. He'd talk to the label again in 2 weeks, and he'd be like, all right, so we're moving forward on that, right? And they're like, oh, well, there's no way we can actually sign this band. He's like, what are you talking about? You said that you really like the music. And then they'd be like, well, they don't have enough Twitter followers. What the hell am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
And that was kind of our experience from him into our new manager and everything. And then it was all just kind of a very harsh wake up call as to like how much the business has changed and how much like good songs are like secondary or like third tier at this point, because now you are a marketer and a branding expert first and second, and then you're in a band third.
Especially if you're doing it on your own, which it seems like that's the way they want you to do it now, is they want you to do all of that on your own and then come see them. And you're talking about Twitter followers and all this other stuff. And that's what gave way to these damn bots that people now like build and sell out. And people just will have like, you know, 100,000 followers and then like 5 likes on a picture. And it's like, wait a second, something doesn't add up here.
So that was funny. The other band that manager that we had, you know, that was the pilot project, this guy had like 130,000, you know, followers on Facebook, but like one, I'd never heard of him.
Yeah.
2, it was like, you looked at his other social networks and they were like 1/20th that size. And like, and I'd be like, hey, don't you think that this is weird? And he's like, no, it's great. And I remember thinking, like, there are bands that, like, I know that are, like, known in, like, certain circles that, like, don't have that many likes on Facebook. Like, how is this possible? And it's like, it's because it's all fake. I mean, that's the problem with the industry now, is that it's so, like, digital numbers driven. Like, it's so easy to fake. And it's so easy to, like, create a narrative that, like, something is happening when, like, it's not. Like, there's so many artists that, you know, have, you know, I've got like 50,000, you know, monthly listeners on Spotify, and they couldn't sell out a living room.
Exactly.
You know, it's just so weird right now. And unfortunately, to my detriment, I'm a very old soul, and especially having a cousin who made it huge in the old music industry, like, I'm kind of like perpetually stuck in that mindset of like, why can't it just be like the old music industry?
So you're perpetually trying to get with a label, get, you know, just that whole path with a major label and everything, and trying to adjust to this new system where basically you have to do everything yourself until if you even want to join with a label, which, I mean, I guess you join for their contacts, or if you got big enough to play one of these arenas that they own now with their 360 deals and everything. They basically own. You can't play them unless you get with one of the big labels or anything. But and I wonder if they're going to start, you know, coming down to the smaller club level and doing that type of thing too, and just sort of box people out, because that's sort of the only thing they offer now, because everyone's doing everything on their own. You're talking about
there's
having
so much you can do on your own.
Yeah, and I mean, dude, if you're a marketer right now and you have a halfway decent band, you can make a living just touring to a small hardcore base, especially if you do it right. And I find that more and more, especially talking to musicians and everything, you know, just a small handful that I have so far starting this podcast. It's like they're all marketing experts, and they're like, hey, man, we can help you out with the, you know, market your podcast, tell you what to do. And I'm slowly learning from them. But it's I should have gone to school to be a marketer, because I'm becoming one anyways. And I think everyone in Nashville is, because everyone in Nashville is a musician. Seems like they are anyways, trying to make it.
Yeah, it is weird being in a city where everyone is like you.
Yeah.
In growing up in Virginia, being a band guy was like, that was your thing. Like, oh, you're one of those band guys. Like, even though Richmond has, a nationally renowned, punk and hardcore scene that spawned out of the DC scene in the 80s and 90s. So like,
that's incredible. I didn't know that.
What's that?
I said that's incredible. I didn't know that Richmond,
yeah,
Virginia had such a
there's
big scene.
bands like Avail and Strike Anywhere and Municipal Waste and Beretta and Down to Nothing and the hardcore scene, and I'm sure I'm forgetting several, but there's a band that I idolize called Conditions. They kind of broke out in like the mid 2000s in the kind of like the Warped tour scene.
Yeah.
And so it's not inconceivable that you would play music like being in Richmond, but like you're still like a band guy. Oh yeah, also the other big one was Gwar and Lamb of God, are the two huge ones coming out of Richmond. I can't believe I forgot those.
Yeah.
But still, you're like a band guy. But like in Nashville, it's like, I remember I've been in a relationship for several years now, but I remember when I was like single, and I could tell that when the people I was going out with found out I was a musician, like that was just like, they're clocking out. I'm like, oh, another one of these guys. Great.
It's like
you know what I mean?
Yeah, like being an actor in LA. And yeah,
that's exactly what it's like.
And go to, pre-COVID, go to any karaoke bar or night downtown on a weekend. You're like, Jesus Christ, how's this guy not, signed, or he probably is. And
I remember being met with that realization when I moved here, because I love doing karaoke. I'm like pretty good at it.
Yeah.
I mean, I sing in a band, so like I like to think I'm pretty good at it. But like there were some people where I was just like, you know what, I might just like not do anything tonight. Like I might just like sit here and drink because I don't want to follow that.
Yeah.
but it's also funny because you could like see that like there are people who like prepared to like show up at a karaoke bar. I'm like, oh, come on, man. Like, that's not what this is about. Like,
but it is for them.
That's lame. But, it is what it is.
Yeah, so
that's
when
a
you're
really sick shirt, by the way.
Oh, thanks, dude.
Fucking Deadpool and the Unicorn. That's
yeah. Good. For people listening, I'm wearing a Deadpool shirt where he's riding a unicorn with two Mac 10s. Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
That's awesome.
Anyways, so how did New York sort of shape your sound before? I mean, did it change? You said you sort of the Ivins sort of grew there, and
yes, very much so. So when I moved to New York, for the previous, I moved to New York in 2012. For the previous 4 years at that point, my brother and I, it's funny for him, but we were playing in a band called the Jim Ivins Band, which was very like acoustic pop rock. It's very like Goo Goo Dolls, Gin Blossoms, Matt Nathanson, like kind of vibes with that. And the precarious position that we found ourselves in Virginia was that like we were too hard for like the softer bands, and we were too soft for the harder bands. So we didn't really fit in anywhere. So I always thought that like made us unique, but apparently that just made you like where so nobody knew what to do with you. But so we moved to New York, and so we were still doing that. And the guy who started playing guitar for us in New York was actually someone who I knew from back in Richmond. He went to another high school, and our bands, back in high school, my high school band and like his high school band, kind of rivals, you could say. And so he moved to New York, and then he had played in another band, which was very like thricey, I would say, where it was like kind of heavier with a lot of like atmospheric guitars.
Yeah.
And I always found his playing to be so interesting. This guy's name was Cullen McDonald, the guy who played guitar with us. And I always just was so fascinated by his style. And I always just thought like, well, if I put him like playing these acoustic kind of pop rock songs, I always think that would sound cool. Like that would make us sound different and interesting. And so then we start playing, and then we had this bass player named James Tan who joined up with us in New York, and he was kind of from like a progressive like background, and I was like, well, damn, if we like put these guys together, like what could we make? And so like I was living in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and I was just kind of, I had this weird visual in my head, and I can't describe it. I don't know why it was what it was, but I was like, I want to make music to soundtrack me walking home drunk at 3:00 in the morning in the Lower East Side while wearing sunglasses. What does that sound like? And I thought about Cullen and James's playing. And so I just thought, like, I just want to write songs that I want to hear these guys play. And so there's a band called the Stereophonics out of Wales, and they're like one of my biggest influences. They're one of these bands that are like massive in like every other country, but never broke America.
Yeah.
Like they play stadiums in Europe, but like they could maybe play like 1,000 cap club in America. And so they have this album called Language, Violence, Sex, Other. And then Arctic Monkeys had just put out AM, and 30 Seconds to Mars a couple years back had put out This Is War. And so I kind of took all of these records and I was like, I want to make music that sounds like that, because I thought, I just thought that sounded way more interesting than the music that we were making, which I thought was really good. But I was still just thought like, nah, I want to plug in and just crank up the volume and just like make cool, just like swaggery rock music, like huge hooks and with all this atmosphere, and like that's what I want to do.
That really comes through on y'all's recordings, and I really want to see you guys live, because whoever is producing or mastering y'all's tracks and everything, they're so fucking full. Like they sound like a kick in the chest. They're like
thank you.
And so
that's exactly what we wanted. So I'm glad that you feel that way. So thank you very much.
The tracks sound amazing. Not only are the songs obviously good, but the tracks are they sound fucking great. So I really want to see you live to see. I'm sure that's the way you guys sound live as well. But what you're describing is exactly what you became.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, that's I really want you to see us live too. I think Billy Corgan, Smashing Pumpkins, it's one of my idols, and he always talks about that the thing that set the Pumpkins aside was that they played with power, and like that's always what I want us to be. It's like, there are bands that will play heavier than us, or play faster, or like whatever, but I'm like, we play with more power than anybody around. Yeah, that's what I think. We don't play to clicks, we don't play to tracks. It's weird that I have to say that makes us different. I think that's very sad, but we're just four guys who crank it up, and we kick your head in every time. And but the melody is so important too. It's finding the balance between those two aesthetics of wanting to play with power but also play with melody and make music that people remember and want to sing, while also getting that kick in the chest that you were talking about. And that's really all that we strive to do.
Well, I think you're I always strive for halfway decent. I think you guys have at least managed that. All right, so tell
halfway
me,
decent would be nice.
right, that's what I always go for. Tell me about having your brother in your band. I've always wished that my brother would get into music. He briefly picked up the drums, and now they're sitting behind me. I took them because they were gathering dust. I've always wanted a sibling, but I can imagine I can only imagine the fights that you guys must get in.
Oh, dude, you have no idea. So my brother and I always say that we're so close that we're like too close.
Yeah.
Having Bill be our cousin, and then our dad has been playing music in bands, and he's a worship leader. So he's been playing music since he was in high school. So having Bill and having our dad, music was just always a thing in our house. My mom used to say that we play music and she plays the radio. But music was just always a thing in our house. And so we had this garage in the house we grew up in that, eventually, when Jack decided he wanted to play drums, and I always, since I was a kid, seeing Bill play guitar, and my dad play guitar, I was like, I want to play guitar.
Yeah.
So we just turned our garage into, the rock out space, and of course having the classic stories of all the neighbors calling us and calling the cops, and like noise complaints, and we did all of those things. And Jack had a band when he was in middle school, and I really wanted to like be in his band. He was like, no, Jim, you can't be in my band. And so then I would start my band. Then I had a band, and then Jack's thing didn't last, but mine, I had a band, all throughout high school and into college. And Jack and I never played music together until I was in college, and he was already 2 years into college, which, people always think is weird. And looking back, I'm like, yeah, I guess it is kind of weird that we never really did. But Jack just like, he became this virtuoso drummer. I mean, he was that classic story of the kid who would just lock himself in a room for like 6 hours and just like learn incredible shit. I mean, Jack, he would, are you familiar with Dream Theater?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay. So Mike Portnoy, the drummer of Dream Theater, he had a side project called the Liquid Tension Experiment.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that, but
it's just like a super, super progressive, like all instrumental like version of Dream Theater, because John Petrucci was also in it. And so Jack would just like lock himself in the garage at like age 14 and learn Liquid Tension and Dream Theater drums like perfectly.
Yeah.
And so it was just like
That's
insane.
incredible.
So I always knew that Jack was this like incredible drummer. And so when my high school band was, we got to college and we were like, all right, we're probably not going to keep doing this. And so I started writing these acoustic songs, and I wanted to put a band together. And I was like, well, why don't I just have Jack play drums? Like, then I don't have to like ask anybody. And Jack and I've never played music together.
Yeah.
And so naturally, what happens with Jack and I is that I feel like it's almost like ingrained in his DNA that whatever I say, he has to want the exact opposite.
Well, yeah, your brothers, obviously.
So it's just a lot of this. But in doing so, as the Ivins have written more and more, and we've gotten more and more down that rabbit hole, I have found that the push and pull that Jack and I bring to the writing process, and now that Reagan and Hatton are our bass player, our lead guitar player here in Nashville, now that they write as well, now the pushing and pulling goes in 4 directions. But when we were making the Code Duello, our first album, it was just Jack and I writing it. And I found that like the pushing and pulling that Jack and I had, where we would end up meeting in the middle was always the best. So even though he makes me so angry, so like, and because he's my older brother, he's the only person who can make me go 0 to 60 in like 1 second. It make me just so mad. But like, he'll make me so mad all these times, but then like, I'll realize sometimes when I'm like, shit, he's right. I hate that. And so, because again, I'll be like, no, I want us to go, this way. And he's like, no, we have to go the opposite way. And I'm like, but that's stupid. And then, we do this tug of war thing where eventually then we get into this ground where like, oh, like if we do like a little of this and a little of this, like that's really cool.
So would you say that he always pushed for like more technical, since you're saying he would lock himself and learn Dream Theater type, progressive type music? Is he always leaning towards more technical music?
Here's the thing about my brother. He is a swath of contradictions.
Okay.
Because what you just said is true. Like he did come up learning really technical stuff. Now, Jack is Mr. It has to be the simplest thing ever. And why don't we just do a classic 4 on the floor beat here? And I'm like, who are you, man? Like, and
well, he's not wrong.
When we were doing Jim Ivins' band, he would always complain that our songs were too soft. So then I start writing more rock songs. And then after a couple of years of that, he's like, dude, where are the pop songs? Like we need people to like sing along. Where are the pop songs? I'm like, are you kidding me? I was writing pop songs for like 7 years and you never liked any of them. He's like, yeah, but that was before. Like now, that's old stuff. Like now I want poppy stuff.
Right.
So it's again, so even with where he thinks our sound should go, it's just this constant pushing and pulling. Because now I'm like, well, I just want to kick everybody's head in. Like I just want to rock. And he's like, no, we got to keep that pop going.
So a little bit of both.
Yeah, so it's just, but I think that's what makes a really good band really good is when you have all these different ideas, but because you can't force chemistry.
Yeah.
That's one thing that you find from playing with bands and playing with as many people as we have. Like you cannot force chemistry, and when you have it, and you let it run its course, I think that's where greatness lies.
Absolutely, and being able to communicate like that without anyone getting actually pissed off. Well, I don't know. Maybe you and your brother.
No, people get pissed off for sure. That's just a part of life. But I think the thing that makes Jack and I work really well together is that, so, Jack learned drums and I learned guitar.
Yeah.
So then over the years, we ended up switching in terms of like what we wanted to spend our time doing. So Jack decided he wanted to learn how to play guitar, and I decided that I wanted to learn how to play drums.
Yeah.
So in doing so, after a while, tooting my own horn, I actually got really good at drums, and Jack got to be a pretty decent guitar player. He's got to be really good. And so we know how to speak to each other. So there's no way to offend the other person, because, sometimes someone can say something bad about an idea. It's what the fuck do you know? You don't even play this instrument. That's kind of how I feel when people critique my vocals. I'm just you guys don't even sing. Get out of here. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But with Jack and I, with at least the guitar and the drum stuff, we know where the other person is coming from. So it makes it a lot easier to communicate ideas that way, especially when trying to communicate drum ideas is just a collection of so you go and then you go and you make all these ridiculous noises.
Yeah.
And hand movements, and most people are are you having a stroke? What's happening? Whereas with us, I can be okay, I'm pretty sure I know what you're saying because I can think that way too.
Yeah.
And that's proven really fruitful in our writing relationship.
Interesting.
But given that Oasis is my favorite band of all time, I do sometimes see the parallels between us and the Gallaghers.
Right. I don't know if a transformer just exploded outside my house, but there's a giant boom, and I'm just going to ignore it and hope that doesn't go.
What part of town are you in?
Hendersonville. So
okay, right on.
Yeah. 15 minutes outside.
Exact opposite direction. I'm in Antioch.
Okay, got you. Yeah. All right, so once you guys sort of formed, you kind of knew where you wanted to go with your sound and everything.
Yes.
Then you make the big jump to Nashville. Why? I know to the outside world, Nashville looks like country town, and you get here.
Not wrong.
You get here, you find out it's not quite that. I mean, if you stay on Broad, yeah, you can live your whole life and never know, but it's not that. And so, what did you just play a show here and find that out, or?
Nope. It was even more innocuous than that. So we lived in New York for a couple of years, or I did, and Jack lived in DC at the time. So he, I was just gonna get another drummer, while I was living in New York, and Jack was no, absolutely not. And so he would take the bus from DC where he was living up to New York to play shows. So I left New York and we went back home to Richmond for 2 years. And, we were kind of in a holding pattern at that point. We're just kind of waiting to see what happened, because we also had another manager come in to co-manage the band. And that was another just kind of funny thing. This guy used to manage Kiss, and he managed Lamb of God, and he managed Conditions, who are two Richmond bands. So we thought that he gets us, because we're a Richmond band, and he used to manage Lamb of God and Conditions, and he used to manage Newfound Glory and Breaking Benjamin. And so he came in, and we're kind of waiting to see what was going to happen with him. We're waiting to see what's happening with the first guy. And then after 2 years, it's just everything fell apart. And we were okay, we could either just stop playing music entirely, or we just need a reset. And I wasn't sure what that was going to be. Jack had talked about Nashville kind of abstractly in the past, but I was like what you said. I was Nashville, that's country music and Christian music town. What the hell are we going to do there? So I would swat down those ideas. Jack never even made any serious, moves towards that. He would just talk about it from time to time. Well, then our guitar player now, Hatton, he also grew up with us in Richmond. We went to a K-12 school, and Hatton was in Jack's grade.
Wow.
And so Hatton was this incredible guitar player. He kind of like Jack. Hatton was the kid who in 6th grade locked himself in his bedroom and didn't come out until he could play Sweet Child of Mine, note perfect.
Yeah.
And he was that guy around school. And when I was living in New York, we came home to play a show one time, and our guitar player couldn't play. So we just called Hatton out of the blue, because every now and then Hatton would our paths would cross, over the years. And he played the show with us, and it was it went really well. And every now and then he'd check in and be like, dude, that was the most fun show I've ever played. If you guys ever need me to do anything for you again, I will. And as you were getting told, and over here, you guys are about to be the biggest band in the world. You're about to go on all these tours. It's gonna be crazy. We would tell Hatton hey, apparently we're about to blow up. if that happens, do you want to go on the road with us? And he'd always be like, yeah, just let me know. And then none of that ever happened. And then in summer of 2016, Hatton called Jack like out of the blue and was like, hey, I just got out of grad school. I think I'm just going to like pack up my life and move to Nashville, just like on a whim. Like, do you want to come move with me? And Jack had some stuff he had to finish up in DC, and, he was in a relationship, and, he had this other band in DC. So he was like, okay, he was like, I think that's a great idea. I can't do it right this second, but I really want to do it. You should call Jim. So Hatton called me out of the blue. I had not spoken with him in probably 2 years at that point, maybe a little less, but it had been a long time. And we talked on the phone for like an hour. I actually had just gotten a job offer to move back to New York, where it was kind of like I was kind of giving up at that point.
Yeah.
But something about it just started not to feel right. And then Hatton calls me and was like, hey, let's move to Nashville. Like, screw it. Like, let's just drop everything and do it. And for whatever reason, I was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Even though I'd been in Nashville for a wedding 2 years prior to that for 36 hours. So like, I couldn't even really tell you anything about it. I knew nothing about it. I did not know that it was becoming one of the fastest growing cities in America. I didn't know that there was more to it than country music.
Yeah.
Like, I knew zero. I didn't have a job. I'd never lived with Hatton before. Frankly, I barely knew him.
Yeah.
We took an apartment sight unseen. I knew 2 people that lived here when we moved here. So like, it was completely flying blind. And we were just under the mindset that like, we're just going to go and figure it out. See if there's anything there for us. And as we found out, specifically from doing those tribute shows, we were like, oh my God, there's like a big rock scene here.
Yeah.
Like, where did that come from?
So how long have you guys been in Nashville then?
4 years.
Okay. Well, that's a good amount of time.
The first year, I kind of like don't even count for us, just because we were just kind of seeing what Nashville had to offer at that point. Like, we met Reagan, who's our bass player. We met him. Like, so I moved Hatton and I moved here in August of 16. Jack moved here in January of 17. We met Reagan in February of 17. And then we were kind of playing around a bit throughout 2017. Like, kind of like, admittedly, I kind of came in a little cocky, a little green, thinking like, oh yeah, we'll like, because I didn't know that like there was a big rock scene. I was like, oh, we're going to be this rock band and like everyone will, dig us because we're so different. And like, we're just going to like get people to love us like right away. And that did not happen at all. And I was like, oh, we have to work just as hard, in fact, harder than we have in all the other cities, because everybody in Nashville is trying to do what we are doing.
Exactly.
And so 2018 was when things kind of started. We started to meet more people, and we started to play more, and we started to network more, and we started to do more of these tribute shows, and people started to know who we were. And so 2020 was looking like it was going to be a great year, because like 2019 was a killer year.
Yeah.
And yeah, but once things open back up, I can't wait to get after it again, because it really, the music community in Nashville is like nothing I've ever seen in all the cities I've been in. Just everyone just being so down to just play all the time and write, and everyone's so nice. I mean, like, having lived in New York, I mean, I moved here kind of New York shield up, very guarded, don't let the big city get you down. And, because everyone's a dick up there. And then I moved here and everyone's like, hi, like, how are you?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah.
What do you mean, how am I? Like, you're very like, what do you mean you're just that nice? Like, and that's just like what everybody is like here. And it's like, it just totally threw me off that everyone is so nice.
So at first, when dealing with artists here in Nashville, and you encounter people being nice and open like that, did you think they wanted something from you? Were you just super suspicious?
I don't even know what it was. It was just like, how are you this nice? I was like, everyone's mean. Like, how is everyone here just genuinely nice all the time? Like, and the other thing that was really attractive was that there is no like Hollywood mentality here. Like, people who are objectively famous they're just here.
Yeah.
They just live their lives. and people don't bother them really, or I should say, don't bother them as much as maybe they would in LA or New York.
That's the etiquette. I don't know if you know this, but all Nashvilleians are taught that's the etiquette. You see someone famous, you leave them the fuck alone.
Yeah, and I'm like, what a concept! Like, just leave them alone.
Yeah,
like you don't see paparazzi here. You don't see a lot of. I mean, yeah, it's just really, really nice. I mean, I worked at Jack Brown's in Germantown for several years, and it was funny to me. I'll tell you a brief aside. So moving to Nashville, country music capital, I know this much about country music.
Yeah.
I don't know who anybody is. I don't particularly care for country music. But people would come into the bar all the time, and someone would run up to me afterwards and be like, Jim, did you see those Chase Rice or Jason Aldean or whatever? And I'd be like, who is that?
Yeah.
Like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And then a couple months after I moved here, a mutual friend of someone that I knew, who I just met, she came to the bar one day and was like, hey, so I'm shooting this video, Universal's just having me put together this video for Billy Currington, like really quickly. I need a couple. Do you want to star in this Billy Currington music video? And I was like, great. Who the hell is Billy Currington?
Yeah.
He's like, what? Like, what do you mean? Who is Billy Currington? I'm like, yeah, is he a big deal or something? Like, yes. So I star in a Billy Currington music video. You can see it online. It's Do I Make You Wanna is the song. It has like 20 million views.
Yeah, send me the link to that.
And the video is literally me sitting on a couch looking at Polaroids of me and this girl that this other girl met. We went out on this day and did this like Polaroid photo shoot where we all just took selfies of each other with a Polaroid camera.
Right.
And, took in certain situations that like matched up with the lyrics of the song. And everyone was just like, holy shit, like Jim's in this Billy Currington video. And I'm just like, I don't know who that is. Like, I couldn't tell you a single other one of his songs.
It's amazing the type of things you just randomly find yourself mixed up in life. Things that just fall in your lap and you're just like, who the fuck is this guy? Okay, I'll be in the video.
Yeah. And I thought that was like such a Nashville thing. And also that was like such an introduction to Nashville because I'd only been here like 2, maybe 3 months at that point.
Oh, wow.
So that was also just like kind of a trip for me. I'm like, man, I've only been here 3 months and I'm starring in a major country star's music video.
Like, oh, this is how it's supposed to go.
Yeah, right? Doesn't everybody do this?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
But what was funny about the bar thing was, everyone would like freak out when these country stars would come in. Now, of course, they wouldn't bother them, of course, but everyone would freak out, internally, people working. But then I would see like a rock guy come in and I'd like turn into a schoolgirl and everyone else is like, who are you talking? Who is this? Like, who are you looking at? I'm like, that's Danny from Ask Alexandria. That's Matt from Reliant K. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, who are those people? It's like, what city am I in? Like, how did I get here? Like,
man. Okay, well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us, man. You've pretty much given us your whole origin story, and this has been one of the easiest podcasts I've ever had to do. I could just sit here and say, yep, over and over again, and just let you go. I could go
for longer if you want to. As you can tell from me, I know how to run my mouth, so I'm happy to talk to you as long as you want.
It's absolutely perfect. No, we're trying to catch a show here in a minute, but
right on.
Go ahead and plug anything you want. I know you got your new singles coming out. You've got an album.
Yes.
Yeah, plug everything, man. Anything you've been doing in quarantine with the band,
yes.
I want to know about it.
Okay, so my name is Jim Ivins. That's Ivins, and I play and sing lead vocals in The Ivins, and we are what I call a loud alternative band from Nashville. And we have a single called Bloom coming out on October 30th, or by the time you're hearing this, maybe it's already out. We had a single called Composure that came out in the summer. That actually got used by several Red Bull athletes on their Instagram accounts, so that was pretty cool. We put out a cover of Graveyard by Halsey earlier this year that I thought was pretty unique. That's something to check out on streaming and on YouTube. And for me personally, I just put out an album called Quarantunes today on October 23rd. And it includes members of Florida Georgia Line and Three Doors Down and Daughtry and Reliant K and Tonic and CKY and all these incredible bands and all these artists that are just amazing people who just wanted to jam and play my songs, which was just so cool. And that's everywhere that you can find streaming. And for us, the Ivins, follow us Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Everything is just the Ivins, Ivins. And we're going to have new music. We're going to have a new song every 2 months and a new video every 2 months. So staggered 1 month from each other for the foreseeable future. So you're going to get real tired of seeing us after a while because we're going to flood the stream. So everyone come along for the ride with us. And thank you so much, man, for having me on this podcast. This was so fun. And we need people like you. So
thanks, man.
It really means a lot when someone like you reaches out to have a band like us on a podcast. So Mitchell, thank you so much for doing that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, dude. And it's been absolutely awesome just hearing about the Ivins straight from you, and the way you put it and everything is you're a very eloquent speaker. There's no problem there for sure. And
I'm a public relations man.
Yeah, it worked out for you. All right, man. Well, appreciate you coming on, and it's been a great conversation. And I'll get And that's the episode with Jim Ivins from the Ivins. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed talking to Jim. He's super easy dude to talk to and just seems like a genuinely good person. Now, as I mentioned in the last podcast, I'm not entirely certain how to end these episodes, but in the interest of creating a network where the artists can promote each other and raise each other up, what I've been doing is asking each guest to pick a local Nashville artist of their choice and recommend them to the listener. Jim picked the Pretty Ravens, and so check them out. I haven't done it myself, but if Jim's recommending them, they have to be good. So check them out. I'm sure you can find them on any social media or streaming platforms of your choice. And while you're checking them out, I'll play for you the Ivins' brand new single, Bloom.
Don't be stuck. The inspiration and the focus until you found me. Meet and believe entire motifs. A disarray phrases and salvation and blind serenity. It had to be you, it had to be sometime. That you're with me is just all I need to know. You are the water that makes all my dead leaves grow and cleanse them. I'm poison to thrive in. Bloom. Wasn't wishing well for ne'er-do-wells. Metallic wasted anthems never spoken, only dreamed and their unity had find me, but your home gave up first chance to set me free. As I live and breathe, my eyes don't deceive. Relief in the desert, drunk on disbelief. Hallucinations, just fascinations.